Nick Marshall loves women, but in his own way. His mother was a dancer in the corps de ballet, so Nick spent his childhood backstage, surrounded by half-dressed women. For his mother, nothing was more important than her son, and he became the lucky charm of the dancers. Nick basked in women's attention from an early age, growing up into a hopeless womanizer who believed he had mastered everything about the opposite sex. Every morning, Nick is woken by his housekeeper, whom he simply calls Babe. She collects dirty laundry, leftover whiskey, snacks, and women's underwear, then sends them all to the wash. Nick never gets to work before 10. He's an advertising agent, one of the best, and today, he's expecting a promotion. Nick's colleague Morgan and his loyal secretary congratulate him in advance. When Nick meets with his boss, Dan Wanamaker, he's told that women now dominate the sales market. Therefore, the creative director position, which Nick thought was his, will go to a woman. Recently, Darcy McGuire, a shark in the advertising world, left her previous company. Nick is disappointed but has no choice but to accept the decision, though he plans to outshine Darcy and take her place. After the unpleasant meeting, Nick attends the wedding of his ex-wife, Gigi. He learns that while Gigi and her new husband are on their honeymoon, Nick's 16-year-old daughter, Alex, will stay with him. Their relationship is strained, and neither is thrilled about the arrangement. Back at work, Dan introduces Darcy McGuire to the team. Darcy immediately takes charge, handing out boxes of products designed for women. Each team member must come up with ways to market the items, individually or as a set, by the next day. At home, Nick opens a bottle of wine, plays some music, and tries to make sense of the women's products. Initially, he struggles. He then grabs a teen girl's music CD from Alex's backpack, drinks more wine, and dives back into the task. He applies a pour strip to his nose, mousse to his hair, mascara to his lashes, and polish to his nails. He even waxes a strip of hair off his leg.
1, 2, 3.
And, as the piece de resistance, puts on pantyhose. Just as Nick is about to try on a bra, Alex comes home with her friend.
Hi.
What are you doing?
Father and daughter argue, with Alex accusing Nick of being indifferent and not even remembering her boyfriend's name. When Nick recalls it and runs after her to apologize, he slips on a jar of marbles, falls into a bathtub full of water, and gets electrocuted by a hairdryer he was holding. The shock knocks Nick unconscious until morning when Babe's grumbling wakes him. But when he comments on it, Babe insists she didn't say a word. Outside, Flo, the hotel doorwoman, catches Nick a cab as usual.
Thank you, Flo.
You're welcome, my little sweet ass.
Nick realizes he can hear her raunchy thoughts. He decides to walk to work, and in a crowd of women, Nick discovers he's not imagining things. He can genuinely hear women's thoughts. At the office, the flood of female colleagues' thoughts overwhelms him. Nick's self-image as an irresistible ladies' man quickly crumbles. He even notices Erin, a shy office assistant, contemplating suicide because she feels invisible. The only respite comes from his secretaries, whose minds are completely silent. Nick confides in Morgan, but Morgan thinks he's joking. Morgan drags him to a meeting led by Darcy, where everyone presents ideas for the women's products. Nick proposes a concept involving a naked woman under a waterfall advertising lipstick, but the women's thoughts immediately protest, and he falls silent. Nick overhears a colleague thinking about taking headache pills to avoid intimacy with her husband. Inspired, he shares the idea, which Darcy praises for its originality, though without enthusiasm. Nick feels like a failure, and the constant noise of women's thoughts makes it hard to think clearly. So he comes home, kicks out his buddy Alex, who she's going to prom with, repeats everything he did the night before, and goes out on the balcony in a thunderstorm with his hairdryer on. A bolt of lightning strikes the hairdryer. Nick passes out, but in the morning he can't check to see if he's lost his ability. There are no women around, as luck would have it. Nick goes to a supermarket full of women and realizes that he keeps hearing their thoughts. Then he flies to the therapist he and his ex-wife used to go to. Experientially, he proves to her that he really hears women, and the amazed therapist opens Nick's eyes. Knowing what women are thinking, he can control them. Nick takes the therapist's advice to heart and first goes to seduce a barista named Lola. She is crazy about Nick, but has long since rejected his advances. After listening to her thoughts, Nick easily convinces Lola to go out with him. At work, he charms almost every female coworker one by one. Then he heads to Darcy's. Nick is determined to get her out of the company. He overhears her thinking that Nike is looking for a new ad agency. It's a very big order, and Nick wants to take it on. However, Darcy warns him that it's important to think like a woman here. After all, Nike wants to promote a new collection of women's clothing. Nick convinces Darcy that he can handle it. He overhears her thoughts and voices them faster than Darcy herself. At home, Alex and her school friends are waiting for him, and the girls aren't thrilled with him. However, Nick quickly remedies the situation by promising his daughter that he will take her shopping for a dress for the prom. In the evening, he goes on a date with Lola, and afterwards she invites him to her place. But because Nick can hear all her thoughts, he can't concentrate and he fails. But Nick is not one of those who are used to pass up in the face of difficulties.
Let's pull this together, buddy.
He gathers his courage, goes to bed with Lola, and does everything as Lola wants in her thoughts. After that, the girl literally melts with pleasure. Nick wants to get the contract with Nike because then he can get rid of Darcy. So he eavesdrops on what women are thinking, and everywhere he goes. He even charmed all of his female colleagues, who had previously had a low opinion of him. When Nick works together with Darcy, he begins to admire her ability to create the right slogans. He hears her thoughts and complements them with his own. This is how they come up with the best ideas. Darcy begins to like Nick as well. They even stay together after work to just chat. Nick's relationship with Alex is also getting better. They pick out her prom dress together, and in the process, Nick overhears her thinking that she's going to sleep with her boyfriend after the prom. Nick decides to have a conversation with her about pistols and stamens. But Alex walks away from the conversation. Her mom has already talked to her about everything, and Nick doesn't need to play the caring dad. An annoyed Nick is watching TV at home. When he gets a call from Darcy, he invites her to a restaurant for a cocktail. In the process, Nick learns that Darcy is divorced. That's why she left her last job, since she and her husband work together. After spending a pleasant evening, they kiss and then go home. Darcy wanted to invite Nick back to her place, but he wouldn't let her say so. When Nick returns home, Lola is waiting for him at the front door. 6 days after their meeting, she has been in a state of confusion because Nick has never called her. She thinks he's of a non-traditional orientation because he understands her so well. In her mind, she begs him to come out. Then she'll leave him for someone else. So Nick says he's of a non-traditional orientation. At work, Nick overhears Erin's thoughts again, who thinks she is invisible. He inquires about her from the secretaries, and they tell him that she once wanted to write texts for advertisements, but Nick rejected her candidacy. That day is the presentation of the Nike commercials. Darcy convinces Nick that he should be the one to do the presentation, although he tries to explain to her that she came up with most of the ideas. Darcy, however, doesn't see it that way. The presentation is top-notch. In the evening, Nick writes Darcy a message in which he wants to confess that he stole almost all her ideas. But then Darcy walks in and invites Nick to her new apartment, where they spend a romantic evening. The next day, Nick learns from his boss that Nike has agreed to sign a contract, but he has fired Darcy. Nick says that he should bring her back, as she was the one who came up with almost all the moves for Nike's commercials. He goes to see her to explain himself. On the way, Nick learns that Erin didn't show up for work today, and he hasn't heard from her. Nick goes to visit Erin. He is afraid that the girl has committed suicide. Erin lives in Chinatown, and an elderly Chinese woman shows Nick the way to her house. Then lightning strikes a transformer box, the wires spark, and Nick feels something in himself change. The door to Erin's apartment was open. Inside, Nick found a bottle of pills and a goodbye note, but Erin was alive. She crept up behind him and nearly hit Nick with a tennis racket, exchanging a few phrases with her. Nick realized that he had stopped hearing the women's thoughts. He tells Erin that he wants to hire her to write promotional texts, and the girl agrees. Nick tries to call Darcy all day, but she doesn't pick up the phone. Gigi calls him, telling him about Alex, who's been in tears and called her several times. Nick rushes to his daughter's graduation. Alex is locked in the bathroom and refuses to come out. Turns out she decided not to sleep with her boyfriend, and he immediately dumped her. Nick calms his daughter down and takes her home. However, he can't sleep himself. Nick is disturbed by the situation with Darcy. He goes to her house to explain himself. Nick reveals that he has been using her ideas to get her out of the company all this time, but has gradually fallen in love with her. He proves to Darcy that he has really changed and asks her to come back, especially since his boss agrees to it. Darcy, on the other hand, realizes that Nick had to get over himself, that he's the one who needs to be saved, because he's never been so frank with a woman in his life. She loves him, and so she forgives him for his sins and asks him not to leave. Darcy kisses Nick, and he returns her kiss. That's all for today. Subscribe and like if you want more videos like this. See you soon.